Thanks, Lon. And it's kind of funny as well because I just got back from a conference earlier in the off season, and they had a guy come in and he talked about brevity. So he had a book on being brief, especially with people this day and age. And he was kind of talking about how the attention span has gone from like 30 seconds to 10 seconds now. And then I was slotted an hour to talk to strength coaches about nutrition. So I'm up against probably the most impossible challenge ever to keep your attention for a whole hour, but I'll try my best. And today I really wanted to focus on, by the title, it's kind of like a general overview, and the reason, and Lon kind of alluded to it, is that a lot of you guys are the nutritionists in your space, right? Like your athletes are coming to you, and I completely understand that a lot of programs right now don't have the resources to fund a full-time nutritionist. I think when you look over the next 10, 15 years, I think we will get there, but we're not there yet. And so I just wanted to give a broad overview and just kind of give you guys some information that you can take back and apply to your program. So kind of like I mentioned, kind of the objective is to just provide an overview of kind of, what we do here. So kind of give you a little bit of peek behind the curtain. And then knowing full well that not everybody can take everything away and apply it. I completely understand that. So it's going to be very context specific. So I want you to pay attention and think, well, I wonder if we can apply that stuff there, or we definitely can't apply that where I'm at. But I wanted to give kind of everything and give you guys a really good look into what we do and kind of how I feel like a sports nutrition program should be structured. And then you guys can kind of take bits and pieces from it and figure out what you guys can do at your school or your place. So this is kind of just a quick outline. We're going to go over just basically like the 3 goals that I have, just kind of overarching for a performance nutrition program. And then this will be the outline. These are kind of the core principles that we abide by here, and we'll just kind of dive into each one of those and kind of explain how we address each principle, kind of how we apply those. But first and foremost, I've been going, the conferences lately that I've been going, and a lot of the content that's out there in strength conditioning, especially, if a lot of you are probably familiar with a friend of mine, Brett Bartholomew, who's put out a conscious coaching book, and, it's really going from like hard skills to soft skills now, and just dealing with people, and Sean kind of alluded to it as well, and just connections with people and trust and those types of things. And so before I want to get in, because this presentation is a lot about hard skills, I want to just touch on the soft skill piece, because I'm fully aware that that's the most important part, is how you communicate with the athletes and that type of thing. And this is a really cool paper that came out on factors that influence food choice. So literally these are 5 factors that influence the choices that a general person makes, and especially athletes make. So you're up against a lot in terms of trying to get these athletes to change their habits to what you want to do. So for example, the first one is a physiological factor. So appetite, hunger. Some athletes have a bigger appetite than other athletes. So if you got 2 athletes trying to gain weight, one's going to be maybe a little bit harder, maybe just doesn't have the appetite, and we've dealt with people like that. Lean body mass, resting energy expenditure, we'll talk about all that stuff, but every athlete's different, and that really affects how much food they put down. People like different foods, simple as that. GI distress, people have different food allergies and sensitivities. So from a physiological standpoint, that's a lot to deal with in terms of getting people to change their habits. Lifestyle, motives for participating. So it depends, why does the person participate, and especially here, are they participating because they want to win? Are they participating for the camaraderie, for the money? And those things really affect like how important nutrition is to them. Health beliefs, nutrition knowledge. So for example, did a guy come from a school that had a nutritionist or not? And that makes a difference. Psychological, body weight, body image. And that happens in a lot of male athletes too. Usually we think about some of that stuff with female athletes, but happens all the time with male athletes, and body image and stuff like that. So even if you want a guy to be 260, but he likes being lean and he wants to be 230, that's a big barrier. So you got to kind of find a compromise there. Social, so what are their meal patterns? What are their friends' meal patterns? What are the roommates' meal patterns? When do they eat? The culture they come from, their religion, and then last but not least, economic is huge, right? On how we choose what we eat on a daily basis, cost and income, and that applies here because you got a guy can be making $14 million and a guy at the league minimum, so the resources are going to be different for those athletes. So I just want to touch on that, and we'll just jump into kind of the hard skills, but obviously knowing full well that that's the most important part, and we all know that, is building trust with the athlete to basically sell to them what you want them to do, all right? So here's kind of the three goals I talked about. I like these just because they're catchy. The guys can understand them. Super simple. So the first one, what we're talking about from a protect standpoint. So that's one of the first goals from a performance nutrition program. We want to protect our athletes, and really what I'm talking about is keeping our athletes on the field or court or whatever have you. So we're talking about the immune system here. So protecting the immune system. We're talking about hydration through here, decreasing markers of inflammation and soreness, so just essentially recovery. Decrease incidence of soft tissue injuries if we can, and then if an athlete does and will get injured, how can we bring them back to get them on the field? So again, just think of protect as we're really just trying to keep the athlete healthy. Then we're talking about fuel. So this is kind of the analogy we've all heard of gasoline in the tank, right? So this is, and the guys here can obviously really understand that really well, and it makes a lot of sense. So we're just talking about the energy. I mean, how much energy can we give them, and then meeting the energy demands of each individual athlete, which we'll go into. And then we're talking about building the athlete. So again, this is kind of where the nutrition piece complements the strength and conditioning piece. Strength and conditioning breaks them down, nutrition builds them back up. So we're just supporting those adaptations that we're creating in the weight room and on the field, and also talking about specific body comp goals of each individual athlete. So this is a way we kind of show the athletes what we're talking about in terms of the function of their foods. So when we're talking about protecting the athlete, we're talking about all your fruits and vegetables, healthy fats, your hydration like I mentioned. When you're talking about fuel, that's your carbohydrate, all your carbohydrate sources, the fuel in the tank, right? And then build is all your lean protein, protein options, okay? So really simple way to kind of label your foods and kind of give your athletes a little idea of what they're putting in their bodies, like what is the rice doing for me? Oh, that's a fuel food. Or the pineapple, that's a protect food. So it's super catchy, and I think it works really well. And again, I think this could be applied in any program. It's nothing that costs a lot of money or anything, right? This is another way. So then we do some nutrition labels. We're fortunate enough to work with a food service company that can create these. But this is how. So if you're walking through the line for breakfast for us, you would see, okay, pineapple, boom, that's a protect food. A waffle, that'd be a carbohydrate, a fuel food. And then I put a brisket over there, which hopefully you guys will have right after this. A build food. But we go into another level with the red, yellow, green system. And a lot of people have probably seen that system before. Super simple, right? Green, eat more of. Yellow, moderate. Red, stay away from or eat less of, right? So we kind of build little levels out of that. But I think they work really well. And then we kind of take it a step farther, and if anybody's used MyFitnessPal app, we actually created these barcodes where they go on there, and the athlete can scan it right into the MyFitnessPal. So when guys are really super motivated, they can use that. So it's a pretty cool little system there. So here's those principles I was talking about, and basically the point of this presentation is we're going to hop around and just touch each one of them, kind of talk about how we address them, how you guys could take away and address these pieces. So these are essentially the 5 pieces that I find most important, and some people may agree and disagree, and that's great. So the first one is kind of king and the most important, which is why it's at the top, and we're simply talking about energy balance. So the way I explain it to our players that I think they enjoy is that think of energy balance like money in, money out of the bank. So anytime you exude energy, lifting, practice, mental, film session, things like that, that's like taking money out, okay? And then your nutrition is putting the money back in, all right? So I always talk about calories and things like that like a budget. I mean, you have so many, right? And it's just like money. So if you keep taking money out of the bank and you're lifting, you're running and studying and all that type of thing, and you don't put enough back in, that causes problems in the real world, right? And it also causes problems in this realm we're talking about. And this is super cheesy graphic, and I literally just pulled this off Google, but I think then it paints a picture of what we're talking about now practically, is if your food intake is higher, you're putting more money back in, you're going to gain weight. And we're talking about energy balance. We're essentially talking about weight maintenance, right? It's interchangeable. So if your food intake's about the same as your energy intake, taking out what you put in, you're maintaining. If you're putting out more than you're putting in, you're going to lose, okay? So that's what we're talking about here in terms of energy balance. So basically the question is to your athlete is, so what is your individual cost for your work? And everybody's different, right? So how much money do you have to put back in? And yours is different than you, is different than you. So, and why balance is so important is because paying back too much in this realm is bad, and paying back too little is bad. So if you put back too much in, you gain body fat. Gaining body fat's a huge stress on the system. Your risk of injury goes up, more orthopedic stress, things like that, and that's decreased athletic performance is what you want to talk about. If you don't pay back enough, you lose muscle mass, you lose strength. That's a stress on the body in the same way that it is gaining weight. Your energy, you're more fatigued. That also increased risk of injury, illness, decreased athletic performance. So we got to find the balance. But look at all the factors that it depends on, right? Height, weight, body fat, body mass, your volume, metabolic health. NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis, is actually becoming a huge part of how many calories a person burns. And that's literally like if you see people that are kind of like twitchy, or if you see people that are always like tapping their foot or kind of always like moving around, burns a huge percent of calories per day. Whereas if you have people that are just kind of like lounging and super chill, those people don't burn as many calories. And that's not really anything you can control. You can't change a person's personality like that, but it's interesting. But why is this important in the first place? Like, why is body weight goals important, and why is tracking body comp and things? And these are straight out of some scientific articles. I can give you the references if you want them. Catch me after. But probably most of you guys know this. Increases in lean mass have direct correlation to strength, speed, explosiveness. Pretty simple. More lean mass shown to predict on-field performance. More lean mass, higher metabolism, more fat burn. Increases in fat mass, decrease in speed, that's a no-brainer right there. Leads to increased fatigue, decreased endurance, obviously orthopedic strain on the joints. So that's why this is important to find that balance. So here's some resources, and we're not going to touch into each one of them, but when we're talking about addressing an energy balance principle, like how do we do that? I mean, this is kind of the whole overarching program, really. You're talking about determining individual needs, which we'll get into. This is where nutrition plans come in, and again, some people have nutritionists and RDs on staff, and some people don't completely understand it. But some menus and meals and snacks. So if you're controlling some of the post-game meals or pre-game meals or any of the meals that you guys do in the building, I mean, this is addressing energy balance, right? What are your opportunities to provide energy? Nutrient timing, which we'll get into as a whole separate principle, pre, during, post. Talk about travel nutrition, whether it's a bus or airplane. Is that an opportunity to provide athletes with fuel? And then educational and resources outside the building. So obviously private chefs, probably not relative to a lot of your people. Some of our guys can afford that and do that, and that's a resource. Delivery meal services, preferred restaurants, that's an easy one, giving a recommendation in terms of where you think the athletes should eat and pick this and not that type of stuff. And cooking demos, grocery store tours, all this type of stuff falls under here. And then the bottom two we're going to touch base a little bit is body weight analysis, obviously. That's really how you know if you're reaching energy balance. And then body composition testing and analysis. How much lean body mass versus how much fat mass are we gaining and losing? So real quick, I want to just kind of touch, and this is in terms of like determining energy balance needs. So how much does your athlete need? I wanted to just kind of touch on a quick, simple way to do it. Some of you guys are probably like, this is super simple, I already know how to do this, and some of this might be new to people. So we're just going to do a quick example on an athlete and kind of how to calculate how many calories they need, because that's what we're really talking about. How many calories do you need a day based on what you do? How much money you got to put back in for how much money you take back out? So I like the Harris-Benedict equation, especially for this population, because if you don't have body comp data, if you don't do skin folds or bod pods or DEXAs, you can still use this. So they don't require body comp, and so it's a little bit more effective, and it's about as reliable as any of the other ways to do it. So obviously your step one, so for our example, I have a male athlete, 180 pounds, 5'8", 22 years old, and then an activity factor, which is from that box right there. So it's pretty subjective. You can kind of go through and like, well, my athlete, I don't know, maybe play with it. Maybe 1.5, 1.7, something like that. But really what's the most important is gender, weight, height, age. You guys have all that information on your athlete, I would assume. Again, like I said, assigning an activity factor, subjective, you got to play with it a little bit. Step 3 then would be determine maintenance calories. So that's your resting metabolic rate times your activity factor. So you're essentially just trying to find out what their RMR, their resting metabolic rate is, and that's literally how many calories do they burn if they just laid there all day long and didn't do any activity. How much calories does their body need? And then your step 4 would be going a little bit deeper into terms, okay, so I know they need X calories, but how many of that is carbohydrate, how much of that is protein, how much of that is fat, okay? But remember, calories are king, so honestly, if you can do step 1, 2, and 3 and give that information to an athlete and apply it, step 4 is kind of like a luxury. It's a little bit extra type of deal because calories is king when it comes to energy balance. So whether you're over on carbs or protein or fats and that type of thing, it really doesn't matter that much when it comes down to it, okay? So I'm gonna do what we just had on there and go through each step and calculate this out. So you can literally find a Harris-Benedict calculator online, which I'm sure you've done before. So if you just literally plug in the example information, it's going to spit out that number right there. So 1,886 calories is how much this athlete burns approximately at rest if he just laid in bed all day long, okay? And then obviously he doesn't lay in bed all day long. So then based on his activity, 1.7, which I got from the other graph, that's 3,206. That's the energy balance. That's right in the middle of the scale, okay? Approximately. That's how many calories, that's how much that athlete needs to put back to just maintain his weight, okay? And then like I talked about, so we'll go into this a little bit. So protein, I always start with protein. So after I have calories, I go 1 gram per pound body weight. It's kind of what the research is showing. Really easy to remember. 1 gram per pound of body weight, cool, easy, 180 grams a day. 180 pounds, 180 grams a day. That equals to 720 calories. So we started with 3,206. We've already taken care of 720 of them. And then I go to fat. So fat's a percentage base. So usually the research says 20 to 35% of calories for an athlete is sufficient, okay? And you can play with it and within that range. I just for this sake, I picked 25%, kind of right there in the middle. That equates to 90 grams a day, and that's 810 calories worth right there. So just 90 times 9, as you can see. And then carbohydrate, you just fill in what you got left. So you pretty much add up your 810 calories, your 710 calories, and then how many calories do I have left? And that's carbohydrate, okay? So then this athlete right here gets about 420 grams of carbohydrate. It's about 52%, which is right there. I think 45 to 65 is the general range. And that's how I build. I mean, that's a pretty simple way of how to kind of, if you're talking about meal plans and nutrition plans and things like that, that's a pretty simple way to do it. So this is kind of how we kind of track our trends. I'm sure most of you probably do body weights and stuff like that. Maybe some of you don't. I know there's some sensitivities to it and things like that. But this is kind of just an overlook of maybe our season here. So this is probably the first weigh-in right there of the season all the way to mid-late October. In this position group right here, we have their goal body weights right here. Everybody gets a 5-pound range. Here's their body fat. The report body weight is very important. And then we kind of just see their trend over time going here. So what I'm really looking at right here is this right here. This is what's important is the trend, okay? So I'm not really getting necessarily too caught up. Okay, he's 0.2 over, 0.2 over, 0.5 over, not a big deal. He's a little bit under, that type of thing. But if I come here and look at report from this day, he's down about 1.6% from when he reported. That's not a concern to me necessarily. What I like to look at is anybody that's lost over 2% is probably somebody that we should talk to and just say, hey, noticing you're kind of trending downwards a little bit. Is there something that we can do to help in terms of fueling and that type of thing? So this point right here, down almost 4%. He reported at 332, 319 now. Probably should talk to that athlete and say, hey, what's going on? Are you doing that on purpose? How do you feel? That type of thing. Get some context. This one right here, probably the same thing, 3.5%. This one right here is over, but look, they're in their range. So they actually started heavy. They came in, reported 4 pounds overweight. So just looking at that, you'd be like, oh, he's lost too much weight, but now he's actually in a good spot. So that's what we kind of look about in terms of energy balance and trends over time. And again, we're just looking at report from what that weight is on Friday the 27th to what they reported at there. And this is kind of small, but this is kind of some body comp stuff. So this is how we do skin folds, 7-site skin folds. We just find it to be, obviously I know DEXA and things like that's a little bit better, but in terms of practicality and time, we try to body comp everybody on the same day, and I just can't do 13-minute DEXA scans on 90 guys when they report. So we find body comps, skin folds to do pretty well. So this is kind of just, again, trends over time. We can show the athlete this. So when you first came in here, that was your weight, that was your body fat. Then we did it again, that was your weight, your body fat, same. You kind of look at the trend over time in body fat and your fat mass and lean body mass right there. So obviously this athlete was injured, so he's lost a little bit of lean body mass. Fat mass is kind of over. So that's kind of how we look at that. And then we can give them feedback. So not only can we show them that screen, but then we can kind of show this is a different athlete, but we did it in beginning off season, mid off season. Hey, you lost about 0.6% of your body fat. That's equates to about 1.3 pounds of fat, 2.5 pounds of lean body mass. This is we have a sports scientist that can put this stuff together and make it look really good, so I didn't do this. But yeah, so just again, communicating with the athlete, seeing where they're trending. Are they meeting energy balance? Are there any concerns? That type of thing. So that's kind of energy balance in a nutshell real quick there. And then we'll move on to hydration, and obviously everybody understands the importance of hydration, right? I don't have to go through each one of these, but I mean, just looking at this image alone for an athlete is like, oh, okay, yeah, I should probably hydrate up. But obviously, from a soft tissue standpoint, from a movement pattern, mental focus, I mean, there's been so many studies showing that to be beneficial in terms of just being able to focus and skill acquisition. We all know cramping, fatigue, lower perceived exertion. One interesting one is that, a lot of people don't think about in terms of especially off-season stuff when people are trying to gain muscle mass and things like that, is that a hydrated muscle cell is actually able to grow more than a dehydrated muscle cell. So that's a good seller for some of those athletes that are trying to put on muscle mass. Maybe they don't think hydration is that important. So I always show this to our guys too, and it's like super extreme, but it kind of like makes a light bulb go off. So obviously here's the question to ask. A dehydrated, as is beef jerky, super dehydrated muscle, right? Or a hydrated piece of meat? Obviously the answer is this one. And again, super extreme example, but I think the athlete's like, oh, okay, that makes sense. From a performance standpoint, if I'm trying to pull that one and stretch that piece versus pull and stretch this piece, that's kind of a no-brainer. So the same thing with energy balance, the resources. So what do? Obviously, education is probably the most important, and that doesn't cost any money. Pre and post body weight analysis, so especially during training camp, during those hot times and things like that. Hydration becomes very important. Sweat testing, some of you guys may have to do that. Some of you guys, that's out of the scope a little bit, and that's fine. But sweat testing is really your gold standard in terms of giving people individual recommendations. Urine-specific gravity. How many people have done urine-specific gravity before? One hand. He's our old intern. Nice. All right. And then product selection is a big one. So, athlete taste preference is a big consideration. Even if a product is optimal in terms of electrolytes, if they don't drink it, then it doesn't do any good. Electrolyte content. And I say that because a lot of people focus on sodium right here, but chloride is a huge one that people kind of just put in the back a little bit. And chloride actually is probably, if not more important, to pay attention to in terms of product selection and things like that. And then we just got to remember, and I'm saying this to myself too, is that foods can hydrate as well. Salty foods and things like that is not always pushing fluids. So this is we call this a stall story. I learned this when I was at University of Texas. They would put these in the stalls basically, because you're just sitting there and nothing else to do. I guess you're maybe on your phone, but our athletes can kind of see this. So these hang up right over our urinals basically. And just as a reminder, especially this right here. So we find that to be pretty beneficial in terms of, obviously you've probably seen this all before. Darker color is more dehydrated than a lighter color. Give some good examples. So I like the half your body weight in ounces as kind of a general recommendation, and then a little maybe per hour of training recommendation. So I'd mentioned the training camp weights. So we do pre-post weights every day during training camp. So again, we're kind of looking what they were before practice, after practice. So he lost, basically what we're looking at right here is the percent of the pre. So they lost 3.9% of their body weight during practice that day, okay? That's all fine. We can't panic. What can we do from a rehydration standpoint? But look how he came back the next day. This is what we really want to look at right here, is what he comes back the next morning. 197, the same. I'm cool with that, right? He rehydrated. He refueled up, obviously, okay? He goes out that next day, loses like essentially the same amount. Now he's lost 3.7%. Another yellow red flag, right? Oh crap, we got to rehydrate. He comes back 195, weighs out 188. That's a 3.3%, 195, blah, blah, blah. 4.3%. Now he's down to 194. So now it is maybe getting a little bit of like, hey, we need to probably figure something out here, okay? But it took kind of like these whole 5 days to really see a trend, because he's doing pretty good, but you can kind of see he's like slowly trending down, and you want to kind of stop that before obviously he continues to just go down, 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 okay? These are some of the sweat test stuff that we've done, and again, like I said, some people can do it, some people can't do it. Wanted to show it to you. Obviously, we're just looking at overall change in weight. The sodium loss, as I mentioned, is huge, so we could tell a guy how much sodium they're losing in a practice, how much chloride they lose in a practice. Those are probably your most important. Specific gravity, I wanted to touch on it just because I think it is practical. It's kind of gross because you're testing urine, but it's a practical way, and we found it to be very beneficial from an educational standpoint, just because guys kind of figure out how to hydrate now, because it's an objective test, and we're always talking about objectiveness, okay? So with specific gravity, we're literally just talking about density of the urine. So how much of your urine is water and how much isn't. That's basically what we're talking about, okay? So a normal density of water is 1.0, and this thing can read 1.0 to 1.060. So obviously that would be terrible. Probably need to go get an IV. And then, so obviously the higher the number, the more dehydrated you are. So the higher the number, the more of that sample that isn't water, basically. And this is obviously more accurate than just judging color of urine, because some vitamins and things like that can affect the color. Again, like I said, objective measure. So the process is pretty simple. The athlete provides a sample in a cup or whatever you want to do right here, sterilized cup. You test it. There's some different tools. They're really not that expensive. This is the best one. I did one when I was at Texas that you have to get a cotton swab, get the sample on it, and then you put it on this little thing, and then you like reach up to your eye to look, so the urine is like that far from your face. So I would recommend this one. I'd spend the extra money on that one probably. Okay, but it literally just, it spits back a number between 1.000, 1.060. We like to do anything under 1.020. We just called it 20. So when we reported, it was 15, it was 20, it was 23. Make it simple for the athlete. They don't need all the extra decimal points. And again, it provides trends. I like doing, if you were to start that or something, maybe during training camp, if an athlete can get less than 20 in, 4 days in a row or 5 days in a row, whatever you think, then maybe they don't need to test anymore. Because I think we kind of ran into a problem where we were just testing too much and just testing to test. But when a guy gets 2s every day, like, do they really need to keep testing? I think they got it figured out probably. So you can kind of decide what you think. But again, super cool educational piece right here. So now we'll go into the nutrient timing piece. So we're talking about, from a pre-standpoint, I'm really talking about right before. So I'm not really talking about 4 hours out, 2 hours out. I'm talking about 30 minutes, like as you're going on to the field or court. During, obviously self-explanatory, and then immediately after, we obviously know how important post-training is, nutrition is to recovery. Important considerations is it available and convenient? So we built a fuel bar that's literally right outside our weight room, right on the way to the locker room. So when a guy gets done lifting, he's walking by that thing. So in terms of like putting stuff out to take, couldn't get any easier. I've seen other NFL facilities where their fuel station is like in the basement, and so an athlete has to walk down like 6 stairs and they don't go, because you know kind of how lazy they are and how accessible it has to be. It kind of has to be in their face. And then I think customization is important, and we'll get into that a little bit, but I think preference is important, and we talked about on that first slide about personal preference. And then accountability with this stuff, and I'm going to kind of talk about how we kind of track some of that stuff. So pre-training, and again, a lot of you guys have probably heard some of this stuff, but the kind of the primary goals I say to the athlete is, number one, fuel in the tank, right? We're kind of topping off the tank is kind of the theme that we use here. And that's all the carbohydrates. So super simple. I mean, we can all get bananas, granola bars. It doesn't have to be like super elaborate gels and chews and stuff like that, okay? Just about 15 to 30 grams of easily digested carbohydrate. Pretty simple. I think that probably has 15, 20 grams. This is a full banana is about 30 grams. You could literally eat a half banana and be pretty good. So nothing super complicated here. Just drinking a Gatorade obviously would be give you some sugar. And then hydration. So we go back to protect. So 16 to 20 ounces right before is usually a pretty good general rule, which is not that complicated at all. And then during, the goals remain the same, just a little bit different of a recommendation. So what we want to do from a fuel standpoint is basically conserve those fuel stores that we have in our muscle. We don't want our body to tap into the muscle for energy. We want to continue to kind of give it through the bloodstream. So 30 to 60 grams of carbs per hour. I've found that to be pretty just not practical. I think 30 grams is practical. So that's gels, chews. You could do the bananas again. I mean, you could do literally the fruit chews you get from like Walmart or something. It doesn't have to be super expensive. And fluids. And then hydration, obviously, we're just trying to replenish what we lost with fluids, electrolytes. We want to continue to keep that perceived exertion down, sustain the mental focus. So 16 to 32 ounces per hour. I mean, it's pretty simple really when you think, okay, well, fuel and hydrate are my goals here. Why don't you just kind of kill two birds with one stone and do a sports drink? I mean, it's not rocket science. Like, this will give you carbohydrate, it'll give you electrolytes, and it'll give you fluids. So instead of like an athlete having to do this drink and this gel and this food and that type of thing, like, just keep it simple. Just keep it simple. And then post-training, the goals right here, obviously you want to refuel. So a general rule of thumb is about 1 gram per kilogram. Post-training has been shown to do pretty well in terms of replenishing that carbohydrate. So for that, the athlete we were talking about earlier, that's just about 80 grams of carbohydrate. We want to rebuild, obviously. The most recent research, you guys might have seen it. I think Brad Schoenfeld has been dropping a lot of knowledge on protein, but 0.4 grams per kilogram is what he's kind of recommending now from an optimal muscle protein synthesis standpoint. So for this athlete, that's 30 grams of protein, which is a lot. I mean, that's a lot. Like your normal whey protein scoop's 20 grams, right? And I'm sitting here thinking about this now with my 250-pound athletes or 300-pound athletes, like, and we're doing these like 20, 30 gram shakes. Like, that ain't gonna cut it, just plain and simple. And then rehydration, obviously, just replenishing what we lost. If you can do weigh-ins, weigh-out, stuff like that, that's great. If not, then just kind of replenish it as needed. So this is a way I'm coming back to this right here. And again, this might be a little bit out of in terms of resources and stuff like that, but we do some personalized shakes, and I'm sure you probably heard about that when like Chip Kelly came in, they were doing personalized shakes. So we've actually continued on with it because it really does work really well. So each guy, when they come off the practice field, their weight room, they'll have these shakes laid out on our fuel station, and basically they'll have their name on it. It has what it has in it. I keep the goals, right? Protect fuel. So that's kind of the carbohydrate, the fruit right there. That's what this athlete gets, 1 serving. Then he's getting that for the build standpoint. We kind of give him this. I think they probably look at that once and then never look at it again. But and this right here for us is a maintenance. So we either have an L, M, or G, kind of just reminding us in terms of they trying to lose weight, gain weight, maintain weight. And so we actually track this now where at the end of every day, we can go back to the fuel bar and say, who didn't take theirs? And then that really just stems conversation. It's the same thing with the body weight trends. If X player hasn't taken his shake in 3 days, we should probably touch base and just be like, hey, this is a pretty important part of the recovery process. Are you doing your own shake now? Or are you doing something else? Are you just going to go eat? Do you not like the shake? Do you want to change the shake? So it just creates a conversation for us, and we can just kind of tailor it better to them. And we just so we don't let guys fall through the cracks, basically. So this one, biomarker assessment, is probably going to be the least relevant just in terms of like the resources that are probably available. But like I said at the beginning, I want to touch base on it because even if you aren't at a place that has the resources to do this stuff, one day you probably will. And so I think it's still good to touch on and kind of tell you what we do from a biomarker assessment standpoint. So we're talking about biomarker assessment. We can talk about all this stuff right here. Blood testing, obviously urine, sweat, saliva, they fall under this right here. So we kind of talked about specific gravity. So you're already doing a little bit of that if you're doing USG. Sweat testing falls under that. Saliva right here is kind of becoming a little bit bigger, and we really love it because it's non-invasive, right? You don't got to poke a guy, prick a guy, that type of thing. So these are kind of some of the things coming out, like the nutrigenomics and stuff like that. People doing saliva samples and them claiming they can kind of tell you some different things from a nutrition standpoint based off your genetic profile, which is kind of crazy, but not there yet. But probably in the future, we will be able to do some pretty individualized stuff. So some examples of, and what I'm really specifically talking about right here is just the blood testing. So a lot of nutritional type of stuff, like pretty simple, vitamin D, omega-3, magnesium, iron, maybe some of those markers that we probably feel like are they're most at risk for as an athlete. But I highlighted these ones right here because I wanted to kind of touch base on each one of these. So cortisol, a marker of stress, obviously. Creatine kinase, a marker of muscle damage. And then C-reactive protein, a marker of inflammation. And guys, I understand that there's some error in terms of like, is it acute marker or chronic marker, that type of thing. But what we've really found, and I'll jump into, is that testing these things and showing these to athletes, like, hey man, your stress level's up, or your muscle damage is high, inflammation's high, like, then they can just kind of register, like, man, that's mine. Like, that's my information. Like, that's my muscle damage. You know what I'm saying? Instead of talking just globally, they just take more to heart and they adopt the protocols better. So whether the creatine kinase, obviously that's going to be high. It's an athlete, right? So they're going to have more muscle damage. But if a guy sees his creatine kinase is high and he adopts a better post-training nutrition plan, then we win. Whether this changes because of that, who knows? But now that guy has a plan that he didn't once have before. So that's kind of how I look at it. So I want to just go into the cortisol. This is kind of how we break it down for each guy. This is kind of the things that I'm not going to read every single one of these. You guys can read. But basically in terms of cortisol, why that's important. And then here's some things, and this is based, I did a little bit of kind of literature review last off season on what is good for that type of stuff. So if you got a guy that's kind of sympathetic, pretty stressed out, here's some nutrition interventions for that type of athlete. So whether you're testing that or not, obviously we come right here. Energy balance is important. If a guy's trending too far down or too far up, that's a stress, like I talked about. Carbohydrate intake. So insulin, cortisol, inverse relationship. So carbohydrate intake is important, nutrient timing. And then, unfortunately, because I love caffeine, decreased caffeine intake. And then lifestyle, meditation, yoga, massage, sleep, things like that. Creatine kinase, again, marker of muscle damage, can cause some fatigue, delayed recovery. And then here's some nutrition, nutrient timing. So again, like I said, if these are elevated, they can adopt some of these things, and then that's a great nutrition habit. Regardless if it's really addressing this or not, it's kind of hard to tell. Creatine monohydrate, turmeric, cold water immersion, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have, and that's why they do it. Massage, compression, and then rest periods. And then C-reactive protein, again, an inflammation marker. You guys can kind of read that. Obviously, just in terms of recovery, inflammation. So nutrition-wise, fruits and vegetables, tart cherry juice is kind of becoming more popular in terms of recovery. Carbohydrate intake, again, beet juice is kind of interesting. The omega-3s, turmeric, vitamin D, so there's a lot. But these are all just good habits, right? Like if all your athletes were to be doing all these, that'd be pretty cool. And then lifestyle, cold water immersion, sleep quality. So here's some case studies that we did. We got an athlete's cortisol level right here. These are the interventions we adopted with him. And this was his cortisol on this date. And like I said, by no means am I claiming this caused this, right? But look at the things that he improved in his plan. He was a little light in body weight, increased his body weight. Educated on sleep quality, so hopefully maybe we helped a little bit on the sleep. And post-training nutrition became more an emphasis for him. So he comes away with this now. We've educated an athlete to make better decisions, whether this was a result of that. And then, I mean, how powerful is it when he sees this after doing this? Now he's bought in forever. Same thing, this athlete right here, cortisol was a little high, brought him down a little bit. Again, sleep was a big one right here. And then this guy in particular started doing a lot more stuff during practice, during games from a carbohydrate intake standpoint, which is a great habit as an athlete. So again, he sees the results. Cool. He's going to probably keep doing this. This one, probably a little bit of an outlier. I mean, that's really, really high. And then he came back down. So again, maybe that's an error or whatever that may be. But this guy really took this stuff to heart. And I'm not making these up. Emphasize post-training carbohydrate nutrition. I mean, he did that every day. We tracked it. He never missed. We started getting him in the cold tub a little bit more. I think he came from a program that didn't do a lot of that recovery modality stuff. And then we have some turmeric shots that I really like that he adopted. And again, don't know if that's a correlation or causation type deal, but now he's doing these things. Same thing. Another creatine kinase, nutrient timing, cold water, massage. So the last one, I've got about 7 minutes, is the supplement piece. So obviously the most important thing about the supplement piece, about what you need to know, is there is literally only a handful of supplements that work. And trust me, I wish there was more that worked. I've tried them all. I mean, my cabinet when I was in college looked like a GNC. I mean, I was trying everything and was hoping all of it worked. And then as I got more educated, I realized none of it worked. So I spent a lot of money on stuff that didn't do anything for me. From an athlete perspective, what we really need to understand, and I know probably a lot of you know this, but that's not regulated industry. So, I mean, I could literally go make a supplement in my basement and sell it to people. And people would buy it, and I would make claims on it that you would gain 20 pounds of body mass in 2 days, and people would buy it, and nobody would do anything about it. The fact of the matter is that most supplements just don't work, and they make claims like this, right? Forces massive muscle growth directly on your chest and arms. That's a real label, too. Explosive gain. So shocks muscle into mind-blowing growth. In college, I was like, yeah, give me 2 tubs of that right now. So I'm not going to read through those, but this is the effect that it has on our population and probably some of your populations. I mean, you can get these online. You can find these online, but these are people basically getting suspended for PEDs. And a lot of them are saying, hey, I took it, recommended supplement. I thought I was battling inflammation, contained something in there, didn't know, popped. This guy was I think he just got signed. He popped something. This guy actually never got signed again. Suspension, okay? Pretty serious stuff right here. And I'm going to go through some scenarios that I've either seen or heard that can happen. So scenario 1. So this guy wants to build muscle, so he goes to buy a protein powder at whatever store. The label says 100% whey protein isolate. Players like, well, that's cool. That's got to be legal. But the supplement, little did he know, actually contains an anabolic agent, which isn't mentioned on the label. So they just put it in there, didn't say it was in there. Player tests positive, gets suspended. Scenario 2, because it's not regulated, so didn't know, man, the product was working really well, had that in there. Player 2, this guy wants to burn a little body fat, so he buys a fat burner online. So the label states all the ingredients in it. They're very upfront. We're putting this in there, right? He doesn't know. I don't even know how to pronounce that, so he doesn't know how to pronounce that, and he's like, doesn't know, doesn't have anybody to ask, maybe doesn't want to ask anybody. Well, that's actually on the ban list, and he gets suspended, okay? So this is where we can come in and be educated and say, we want our athletes to bring these supplements to us, and be like, hey, check this out for us. I love when that happens, when guys bring in their supplement stack. It's funny because usually they buy it first, and then they bring it in. They're like, oh, man, I already bought it. So then I'm like, well, just give it to me, and I'll take it. I'm just kidding. Kind of. Scenario 3, player A is in need of some pre-workout, a little kick before practice, right? This guy just goes into this other guy's locker, pulls it out, takes his pre-workout. Well, little did he know, player B is legitimately prescribed Adderall. He takes Adderall. Matter of fact, he loves it so much he puts it in his pre-workout. Whoops. This guy takes his pre-workout, pop. Didn't even know. So don't share supplements is the point of that story. Scenario 4, player's been taking this. I get this a ton. Man, I've been taking this for 5 years, 6 years. I've been taking this my whole life. I've been tested 20, 50 times. I've never been popped, dude. I'm cool. Well, again, it's not regulated supplement. So maybe one day, it just takes one batch. A disgruntled employee says, you know what? I'm going to put something in this, get the company in trouble a little bit. That guy pops just once. It takes one tub of something if it's not regulated. He could take it for 20 years. It takes one. So what can we do? I mean, education and regulation. NSF certification. Anybody familiar with NSF? So this is kind of the gold standard in terms of, I know the NFL, as an NFL, we recognize NSF being legitimate. And it's basically they just test products. They batch test products to say basically whatever you say is in the label is in the deal. So you can be pretty dang sure that you're getting what you think you're getting. And they're obviously not going to certify products that have banned substances on the label. They just updated their app. It's really cool. If you guys haven't updated, if you don't have the updated app, it was like pretty old school, and now it's really, really good. Like an athlete can just scan. They can go to GNC or Vitamin Shop or whatever, scan the label, and it'll tell them if it's NSF certified. And it's simply, if it's not, don't take it. It's pretty simple. And then at the same time, like I don't want to just sit here and diss supplements because there are supplements that work. I'm not going to dive into them. But here's my kind of based on what I've seen in the research and that type of thing. And obviously I have to mention a lot of this research isn't done on, so if you have athletes that are less than 18, then you don't need to worry about supplements anyway. But if you got some different athletes that are locked in on nutrition and looking for extra boost, obviously whey protein, no question. Whey protein, the highest quality protein in the world. That works, plain and simple. Creatine monohydrate, one of the safest, most effective supplements. Fish oil, omega-3, if they can't get it through their diet. Vitamin D, obviously you're just seeing the prevalence of people deficient in vitamin D in the athlete world. Probiotics becoming pretty interesting. I think that's only going to keep taking off in terms of gut health, immune system function, digestion, absorption. And caffeine. Caffeine works really well too. I mean, it's no secret. And then why I separated these, is it gets a little gray area, is that these are supplements. Like if you look at the label, it's going to have a supplements facts label. That's a supplement right here, okay? The nutrition facts label goes to the FDA. They don't necessarily have to get NSF certified because they're kind of already getting checked a little bit by the FDA. So nutrition facts labels, but it's a little sticky because like some of this stuff is used as a supplement, but it's really, you could call it a food. So again, this is I was just talking about this at the Combine with all the nutritionists in NFL and PA, and it's still a little weird, but essentially carbohydrate powders, maltodextrin, things like that are obviously like, I don't know if I'd call that a supplement or a food. Beetroot shots, tart cherry juice, the gelatin vitamin C thing from Keith Barr, just in terms of bringing people back from ligament and tendon type stuff. Turmeric. And then again, caffeine, like I don't know, maybe it's in a product that has a nutrition facts, maybe it's by itself. So it kind of falls under both there. And that's the 5 right there. And I think I'm right on time for questions.
You got time for questions, mate.
Yep.
Do you have a cap on some of your larger athletes? You know, for example, post-workout with the 0.4, you got a 350-pound athlete. Are you giving them 65 grams of protein afterwards? And kind of the same thing with hydration.
Right. Yeah, so the question is there a cap on specifically protein and hydration protocols or recommendations for really heavy guys, 300-plus pound guys, just because it is a lot? And I would say the protein thing is definitely like, there's a difference between what is optimal and what is practical, and you kind of got to like find it, and it kills me because I know that guy needs 60 like you said, but like that's a lot of, in a shake too, like they can't even drink it, it's too thick, especially if you start mixing it with fruit and stuff. So they're going to try it and not take it. So what's better, them getting 20, 30 grams they can take down, or getting 0 because they can't take it down? But it kills me because I know like that's not optimal. but then it's like finding what's practical along the spectrum. And I would say it's the same thing for hydration. I think there's some of those sweat test stuff, those guys come back and it is unreal how much stuff they lose. And it's nearly impossible to actually put it back. You just do your best you can, for sure. I got to slow you back there.
Can you use some examples of foods you provide to your athletes during halftime?
Halftime? So the question was, what specific foods do we provide during halftime of games? So big one is personal preference on that one. So we kind of try to feel out what guys like and things like that. But pretty simple stuff. We do gels, like sports gels. So gels that have carbohydrate and a little bit of caffeine in them as well, because caffeine's been shown to be very beneficial, like during. Bananas, super popular. And then hydration products, just fluids, so like Gatorades and those types of things, just because, like I said in that one slide, you're killing multiple birds with one stone instead of having to have a fluid and then a bar and then a gel and that type of thing. We started messing a little bit with some like energy bite type things, like with oats and peanut butter, chocolate chips and stuff like that. And the guys really like those because they're almost little calorie bombs, like 250, 200 calories in like a little bite. And I know the principles is like you're not supposed to get fat during that time, but like unless it really affects your stomach, that's not really a big deal to me. And the biggest thing that people forget about at halftime is a lot of people are just super hungry, and that affects you mentally because the pregame meal is 4 hours before. So you're talking about from that to halftime, it's probably been 6 hours at least since they've even eaten. So they're just like hungry, like just give me something. You know what I mean? So I think sometimes we got to maybe have a little bit more substantial type stuff in there. But I'd say like gels, fruit chews, bananas, and then some of those energy bite type, and then the hydration products. So nothing crazy, just whatever they'll take. Yep.
You know, mostly high school athletes, you know, they eat around our area. They eat at 10:30, 11, and they don't practice or train until 3.
Yeah.
Obviously, have class in between, so they can't be eating meals or beating stuff up.
Right.
You know, what's ideal? You know, would you say snacks throughout that time period, at one time, for that? Because it is a pretty big gap for before they train or practice.
Right. The question was in this person's scenario in high school, they have their like last substantial meal around 10:30 a.m. and then they probably don't practice again until 3 p.m. So kind of what's the strategy leading up to that? I mean, I guess first and foremost, I would see if you could implement some kind of like something right before when they're hitting the field, whether that's in the locker room or something like that, and literally fruit, granola bars, something like that. Or your other option is to literally just make that meal bigger. So kind of one thing that I remember a little bit from when I was at Texas is how they would do pregame stuff would be like, I think if it was like 4 hours out, they would go like 4 grams per kilogram of carb. If it was 3 hours out, it'd be 3 grams per kilogram, 2 grams. So basically you just have to have a big meal. Like that would have to hold them over. Like they would have to really load up on carbohydrate at that time. But I would say the more practical scenario, if possible, would be if it's in a locker room or whatever, if you're cool with that from a sanitary standpoint, getting something in within 30 minutes of practice. But it has to be easily digested carbohydrate, sugar. It can't be high in fiber, high in fat, anything like that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm currently working with 2 NFL defensive linemen who are vegan.
Yeah.
And there's an upward trend. Does anything change with nutrient timing?
So the question was, there's definitely a trend in vegan athletes. Specifically, this individual is working with 2 vegan athletes, and if there's any considerations in terms of nutrient timing. I would say in terms of nutrient timing, no, but in terms of just overall diet, yes. I think, and I'm glad you brought that up. I figured somebody would because it is becoming big. We had a few guys this last year that did it the whole year. And what I tell them is that I'm not against it, but you just got to go out of your way a little bit to make it work in terms of some of the plant-based protein powders and stuff like that, some of the vitamins, you know, some of like the zinc and things like that that you might be missing out from meats and stuff like that. So I don't think from a nutrient timing standpoint, because really what we do with them is just use plant-based protein. And I think plant-based proteins are fine if they're fortified with branched-chain amino acids and stuff like that, which most of them are. But from an overall diet standpoint, like this guy was doing a lot of shakes. Because, I mean, you could talk about all day about you can get enough protein through some of those vegan options, but like, I don't know, I'm skeptical. That's a lot of protein. If you're going 1 gram per pound and you weigh 215 pounds, no way. Unless you're eating like beans like all day long. Yeah, I mean, you just can't. Like, let's be real. So vegan, like protein powders and stuff become, I mean, you just got to take a shake. He was just taking shakes with every meal. And if you can do that, cool. But a lot of guys don't want to do that. Yep.
What is your intra-workout supplementation recommendations during strength training activities?
Yeah. I say during strength training, the recommendations during training, specifically during lifting sessions, honestly, Gatorade. I would say like a fluid with a carbohydrate in it would be plenty. And especially because our lifting only goes an hour and a half. It's really not that in terms of length-wise. But there's even some of that research coming out now on just people like literally just carbohydrate like in your mouth can affect the brain enough to kind of keep you going. So it doesn't take a lot as much as we previously thought. So during a lifting session, really like a Gatorade or a sports drink with sugar. And then during practice and stuff like that, I think becomes a little bit more on some of the gels and to try to supply a little bit more carbohydrate in a smaller dose. But lifting-wise, just a sports drink would be plenty. Yep.
If your players are, if you want them to gain weight, how often throughout the day do you actually have them eat as far as time?
Right. So the question is, with a weight gain athlete, how often do you have them eat throughout the day to get their goal? And I would say it would depend, because like when I go back to that first slide or second slide when I said the calories are kind of like a budget. So if your budget is 5,000 calories in a day, I mean, you could eat all 5,000 at 8 a.m. if you wanted to, and it would still have pretty much the same effect. Maybe a little bit maybe a little bit suboptimal due to like nutrient and muscle protein timing, but it's really like what they can do based on their schedule and stuff. Obviously, in an ideal world, you'd split up 5,000 calories over 2 hours, right? 2 to 3 hours, and just do incremental snacks. But if you can't do that, then you've got to have bigger meals. So basically, the way I do it is when we sit down, is like, what times do you have available to eat? And then we just got to fit it in. So if you got to eat a 2,000 calorie snack or whatever you want to call it, a meal, and that's what you got to do. So there's no nutrient from a timing standpoint. There's really no magic way to do it in terms of the whole day. Because like a budget, if you got 5,000, you can spend them here, you can spend it here, you can spend it here, as long as you get it within this time frame right here. So I would say it really depends a lot on the person. And like I said, from a physiological standpoint, some people can eat a ton at one time, and some guys get super full and can't, so they got to do smaller amounts. But it's really hard to get 5,000 calories down in like 3 meals. So that's why they got to do a bunch of snacks and different shakes and all sorts of stuff. Cool. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Will you restrict athletes from eating right before strength training since it's drawing blood directly away from your skeletal muscle and into the viscera?
No, I mean, I personally don't. Oh, sorry. The question is, do we restrict athletes from eating immediately before their strength training sessions just because it's basically pulling blood into your GI instead of out to your muscles? No, I guess simply I don't really do that. But I think the thing is that those foods that we're eating right before are like the gels and some of the chews and stuff like that I'm not like simple carbohydrate that I'm not too worried about. And I think it really comes down again to like, can the guy lift and not be like have an upset stomach and that type of deal. But it's a valid point. I mean, maybe that's something to definitely look into in terms of the effectiveness of the training session and that type of deal. But I would say no, we don't make it. Yeah, we don't make an emphasis on like not eating right before the lifting session. Nope.
I had one more question.
Yep.
What would you say your cap is if you had to estimate it practical in terms of protein in one sitting? Because a lot of research points to say that past 40 grams, you're just breaking it down and releasing the nitrogenous component through the urine. So
Yeah.
do you set that cap with your athletes? Do you demonstrate that, or do you just let them figure it out?
Yeah, the question is there a cap on protein dosing basically at one time, because there is some stuff suggesting that your body can only use a certain amount of protein at one time, and then the rest is kind of getting oxidized and used for energy, which is inefficient. I would say based on some of that like Brad Schoenfeld stuff and stuff that coming out, like that 0.4 grams per kilogram is kind of like the gold standard in terms of how much your body uses for anabolism at one sitting. But if you were to eat more than that, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Your body will just, like I said, oxidize that extra as energy, which is just an inefficient process for the body. But it's not like really necessarily harming you. But in terms of a fuel source, obviously we don't want our athletes burning off protein as a fuel source. That's not efficient. But in terms of like that type of thing, I think that's like 0.4 grams per kilogram as it is right now. Seems to be kind of where people are sitting as kind of the minimum for optimal muscle protein synthesis. And after that, it kind of just gets, it's not like it's wasted, but it's just not used for muscle building or recovery. I think I saw one more right there.
You spoke a little bit on how nutrition impacts the immune system.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any like recommended resources for like GI health or microbiome stuff, microbiota stuff?
So the question is, there's a lot of stuff coming out on gut health and the immune system, if there's any resources available to look into that. Yeah, I mean, I think, honestly, I think there's some more research and stuff coming out on that stuff, and it's crazy now you're seeing like fecal transplants and stuff like that. Like, it's becoming a big deal. As far as resources, maybe I'll catch you after this, and I have some articles and stuff like that for sure that have been coming out, but it's still kind of up and coming for sure. I mean, there's a lot of bacteria in there and a lot of different strands, so it's still a little complicated, but as far as resources, I do have some papers I could share. Mm-hmm. Yep. Cool. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.